So right now I am trying to pull into the parking lot for Howl-O-Scream Tampa. Busch Gardens itself is kind of interesting because, you know, in Orlando, the parks, Disney and Universal especially, you kind of pull off an exit and you're in like the world of that theme park. Like you're kind of away from everything else if you're taking the main highway off to get there. Here you get off the highway, you still have to drive a decent distance. And just funny because it's like there's all this stuff outside of the park. And when you're in there, it's not super obvious. Like, you know, you feel like you're separated from all this, but you get outside of it and there's just like, you know, a whole area going on out there. I did see briefly over one of the walls, I saw some smoke going up. I know I'm a little, or fog, I guess, going up. I am a little late for this one. I thought that I could leave home at like 2 o'clock, get down here, hit the 2 Halloween stores I wanted to go to, then go there with like time to spare, and I don't know what math I was doing in my head, because yeah, I should have left at least an hour earlier. Shouldn't be too late, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, and hopefully I'll be able to get through some stuff at a decent pace tonight. Welcome back to another haunted house video in my October vlog series, or my Halloween vlog series, since a lot of it's happened outside of October at this point. And I'm really behind on getting this one recorded and uploaded, because at this point, this took place 2 weeks ago. And this was going to Howl-O-Scream Tampa. I previously did a video on the Orlando one. That was the first year for that event, but this is an ongoing thing. I've been twice before to the Tampa event, so this is a little more of what I'm used to, I guess, in a weird way. And yeah, if you see any weird like shiny stuff on my arm, I just got tattooed the other day, so there's second skin stuff over top of a bunch of stuff on my arm. So yeah, that's what that is if that shows up. But yeah, so I went on a Friday night. It was October 1st, and when I got there, I was a little worried that it was going to be kind of a disaster, kind of a, maybe not a disaster, but it was going to be hard to get through everything because the crowd getting in seemed massive. There was a ton of people in line for the tram. The tram was packed full of people heading in over to the park. And then the line was kind of a cluster too, because instead of like going through like the switchbacks they had set up, they kind of had everybody go around just a big loop around the switchbacks, but it wasn't really a single file thing. So it was just like a bunch of people side by side slowly getting funneled down. And then they had like the security check and then finally getting in. And I was just like, oh crap, there's so many people. It's going to be a massive wait for everything. And then I got in the park and it was kind of empty feeling. Like once everybody got in and dispersed, it wasn't a big deal at all. It was really strange, to be quite honest. So in the past, actually the 2 years that I went, the first year obviously was the first year that I did it, so it was all new to me. The second year was very much a repeat of the first. There's a lot of the same houses, a lot of the same scare zones, if not similar like locations and stuff for everything. And I don't know that park well enough. It's been years, probably since the late 90s since I've been there like during a normal operating day. So I don't really know the layout of the park as it normally is, where you're not blocking stuff off for the event. But it felt like they sent us different ways or put stuff in different places than they had previously. I know part of that is because one of the areas they used the last 2 times I went is now the home of a new roller coaster. So I guess that area is kind of now off limits. But even the location of some of the scare zones changed up. So there wasn't a physical map I could pick up like at the Orlando one. So I'm going to be using my tablet a bit to cheat and remind myself what things were called and where they were located. But first up, when you walk in, kind of to the left of the entrance, there was a scare zone called the junkyard. This had kind of a weird spot. It was a little loop that I'm not really sure what it was probably used for during the day, but it was kind of back behind where the lockers were, right up at the front of the park. This was definitely an interesting little scare zone. It was literally set up like a junkyard, just a bunch of random stuff everywhere and people jumping out of different areas. The scare actors were interesting there because it wasn't all just popping out and yelling at you. Some were, but others were just kind of like in the distance, like, you know, beckoning to you menacingly or something like that. I don't know if I trust him. So it gave it a cool change up of different types of scare actors there, different feels. I think a couple of them had the leaf blowers that they'd had in previous years as scares. The other cool thing is I was able to recognize several props from previous haunted houses that weren't coming back. Particularly one of my favorites was Motel Hell, and the motel was a Schellberg or whatever sign was actually in the junkyard.
to a hillside.
So it's kind of cool to see that. The house wasn't in, but I could see a little bit of it there. I think there were a couple other things I recognized, but I can't remember offhand exactly what they were. And I'm sure people that have been going longer probably noticed more stuff, because I'm guessing it's just them emptying their prop shop out into this little scare zone. But it was a really cool little zone. I like that it was just a loop, and then you kind of went right back into the main park. It worked pretty well for me, and it was a very interesting aesthetic to it. Continuing, I was going clockwise around the park, the big loop that they have, which that's kind of an advantage over the SeaWorld one, just in the fact that you are able to just continue on a single path and not have to go back and forth to things as much as the SeaWorld one had you do. So the first house I went into was called Witch of the Woods. And this looked like it had a bit of a longer line, but it moved super fast. Like when I first saw the line, I honestly was like, oh crap, do I need to go buy a fast pass? But I wasn't in that line very long. And the house itself was really interesting because I don't know what this area is during normal operation, but it wasn't a single building. It was pathways through kind of like a wooded area, and then there'd be like something that I don't even think was really fully enclosed, like more of like an outdoor structure that had a roof on it. And then you'd move into another thing, and then eventually I think you were more in a building for a longer amount of time. But for a bit, you were constantly going through, just winding through woods, and then going into kind of an enclosed space, then going back out into the woods again. So the first part you're going through, there's like a single scare actor kind of warning you to turn back and talking about like the screams or something that he's hearing. And there's a lot of the actors that hide in the bushes making noise. And you kind of come across this cult scene where there's like people worshiping an idol, I assume of the witch. And it's actually a bunch of like mannequins, and then one of them's alive and jumps out at you. You kind of go through this tunnel, you go through all these different things, and eventually you're in like an area where they make the inside look like the outside, but they make it look like it's raining. And it was just really cool. There were a lot of spots where I'd like turn a corner and get scared of something that just popped up in my way. I remember one time, like, you turn a corner and there's a guy on stilts, which is rare to see in an indoor haunted house to me. I saw it twice, so that was the only house I got to do twice, and I wasn't expecting it both times. It scared the crap out of me both times. As you go through, I think they're taking the victims and like breaking down their bodies, basically. I think you start seeing like dead people, and then you start seeing like flayed people, and by the end, you know, they have the little like drop down, usually just some kind of like spider webs or latex strips or something that you're supposed to go through that are like the barriers to break your sight line. This thing literally had like skinned human flesh hanging down in front of your face. It was kind of gruesome. It was really cool though. A lot of great set detail in it. This house, I talked about with the Orlando one that they spaced people out quite a bit. This one didn't do that quite as much, so I was definitely around other people, and I caught up to the group in front of me pretty quickly, unfortunately. But overall, I mean, it did have a really good feel of really cool set pieces, and just the going inside and outside just elevated it in a way that I didn't expect it to, but was a lot of fun. The next scare zone was called In the Shadows, and this was kind of weird. Like, it looked a little Slender Man-ish kind of thing. There were a lot of people hiding in the trees, and there were like statues in different parts along the edge. It looked like it was almost like showing a progression of somebody transforming from one creature to another, or from a human into a creature, and it kind of like stopped midway and went the other direction to a different creature. Unfortunately, I didn't get to do this one a second time, and I feel like I kind of needed another go through to really understand what I was seeing here, but it was pretty creepy. I don't even know, I haven't reviewed my footage yet of this, and I'm wondering if it's even going to show up much of anything, because I remember it being pretty damn dark.
I like it. I like it. Yeah. That was a long scream. I might lose my voice now.
Next up, another house. This was called The Forgotten. And I thought, based on like the image and stuff, I thought this might be kind of a Lost Boys-ish kind of thing. And when you go up, it looks like you're going into like an abandoned, it was like sewer or something. And there's bicycles outside. That was kind of leading me to think it was more that kind of vibe where like kids stumble across a vampire's lair or something. And it kind of starts out a little bit like that, but as you go through, it kind of became like vampire sex dungeon.
Sex cauldron? I thought they closed that place down.
There's definitely like chains and stuff on the wall, and like I swear there's like whips and like leather masks and stuff. Maybe I'm not remembering that correctly, but yeah, it seemed like a vampire S&M dungeon. That one was decent. It wasn't like super memorable, I don't think. I mean, I don't remember it well, so yeah, I guess it wasn't super memorable, but it was definitely fun. I just can't really like pick out too many individual set pieces to really think about as like, oh, this is like super creepy. I think there's some stuff with like a bed where you saw somebody like maybe hovering above a bed. I really should have done this review earlier, so I actually remember what I was talking about. Next up, kind of in the upper corner of the park, there was Skeleton Crew as a scare zone. This was zombie pirates, kind of repetitive of the Orlando one if you were doing both, but it was okay. It kind of like funneled you from this wider area into kind of a more narrow channel. But right where the scare zone kind of ended, not even fully ended, there was like a Chick-fil-A that a bunch of people were getting food at, and it kind of broke any illusion the scare zone was trying to have, and the fact that the zombie pirates were just standing in front of a Chick-fil-A at some point. And that was one, like, I went through it, and I felt like the scare actors were kind of just doing their own thing, and none of them were really paying attention to anybody. So that was a bit of an annoyance, because it was lackluster, if nothing else.
That's me.
Then in kind of the carnival area, where you're coming back down the other side of the loop, there was the Residence, one of the two returning houses. I believe it was the only new house when I went in 2019, and now it's one of the few returning ones. And this kind of has a Texas Chainsaw, Devil's Rejects kind of vibe, like people are luring you into this kind of rural house, and I guess the idea is that they're capturing people and killing them. This one, you're really just going through the house in a lot of places. There are people, I think, cooking human meat in some part of it. There was a bathroom that had I don't know, the scariest thing in there to me was that they were daisy chaining a bunch of power strips together, and it looked like it was going through the middle of the sink, so definitely an electrical hazard there. There was like a living room you went through, and then people were like watching TV. There's a news van outside of it, which wasn't there the previous time, so I think the idea, maybe almost like a little Devil's Rejects-ish, like you're supposed to be seeing them, realizing that they were about to be like raided or something. At least that was where my brain was going with it. So they're like watching the news report from that van outside in the living room. There's a bedroom scene where they got another TV, but I think that was playing a commercial for Howl-O-Scream, which is kind of funny. But yeah, it was really just a kind of a tour through the house. I think you might have gone to their backyard as well, and then you kind of exited out. So this carnival area traditionally always had like the creepy clowns or the zombies going through it. And I kind of forgot to mention those. Those were kind of in different places, kind of in other dead zones between different scare zones and houses throughout the park. This time it was Deadly Toys, which is a returning scare zone. So it was a little cool. It had different little set pieces set up with building blocks and children's toys and stuff, and then people with like cuddly teddy bear masks and chainsaws and things like that going on. The only problem is that I felt like coming through the direction I came through, I was almost seeing things from the wrong side, so I kind of walked back through it, and it was a little bit more set up, I guess, properly. But it's another one of those scare zones where, because it was in this carnival area, and usually this is just an area for like roving mobs of like I said, clowns or zombies or whatever, trying to do a scare zone in this area, it was a little too well lit. It kind of like lessened up on the atmosphere just a tad. It wasn't bad, but it just wasn't as good as maybe I was hoping it could be. And knowing it from previous years, it can definitely be creepier than it was.
I saw it and still scared me. Don't scare me no more.
And the next one, this one they've done in the past too, and it confuses me that they continue to run both these scare zones. Next one was Little Nightmares, which has a very similar vibe to Deadly Toys. It's children, it was very short scare actors, and they're in like creepy, but you know, like things that would normally be cuddly but are now kind of creepy masks, and there's a like trick-or-treating doorsteps set up, and they have like chainsaws and stuff like that, and they're coming around and scaring you and all that kind of fun stuff. Obviously a different theme on paper than Deadly Toys, but it feels very similar in that it's children or childish things coming to attack you and just doing that, you know, dichotomy between creepy and cute kind of thing. So, I don't know, I feel like these should be combined into a single scare zone of some kind or something like that, or just not run both, because it's just repetitive. And they put them both back to back this time, and it just felt like it could have just been one thing. Though the scariest part was honestly in between those two scare zones. You have to go past the elephant exhibit, and it was hard to see the elephant, but you could definitely smell it. That was terrifying. Next up is a zone called the Shortcut. This was kind of, I think they've done it in previous years where it's like there's a hearse out there and like grave diggers and stuff. But I feel like they went a little further this time. There's a lot of little cemetery sets and the planters around you. And there was like a creepy church with like evil nuns or something out there. Really cool. Only downside is people were using the church as a photo op. So it's hard to even get any real good looks at it because it was always just full of people posing with the nuns or whatever out front. So that's my own rant to continuing from Halloween Horror Nights. I just don't like these scare events being used for people to take selfies. I think it's kind of annoying. Next up, you kind of hit a split in the path where you can go one of two different directions, but there's a scare zone in that split, and this one was Voodoo. I like the concept of this. In previous years and this year, they have a house called Darkwater Bayou, and in the past, that house has always kind of had a voodoo theme to it, which is appropriate given the Louisiana kind of setting of it. But they decided to change it up a little bit this year, and now that house is werewolves. And the idea is that basically the werewolves have displaced the voodoo practitioners from their territory. So now the voodoo zone is outside because they've been basically kicked out of their house. So it's kind of neat to see this whole setup. There's shacks and shrines and things and different people like bleeding or just practicing some kind of weird voodoo stuff. Really intricate scare zone. There's usually the Dia de los Muertos one, and in the past couple times I went, and that was also neat because it was more sets than it was being like an actual scare zone. This one actually kind of mixed the two together. It had a very elaborate looking setup, really spaced out, not a linear thing. You kind of just wander through it in different directions. And then the centerpiece of the whole thing was this big voodoo doll statue, I think holding its own voodoo doll, that just looked epic. So instead of going straight to Darkwater Bayou, I ended up saving that one for last, and I went left at this juncture. I went towards the other house, Cell Block Zombies. My joke going into it was that it was a ripoff of like that Walking Dead season when they're in the prison, because the outside is like a prison. It ended up not really being like that. It was more you're being brought into a prison, I guess. And the beginning is just like guards kind of corralling you into different areas and pushing you through like almost like intake into the prison. And then there's like zombies in the different cells, and eventually they break out and stuff. This was basically, I think the house was Insomnia the previous year, which I really liked. It was supposed to be more like a mental clinic or a dream clinic. And I recognized going through that a lot of the sets were kept very similar or the same, but instead of it being the clinic, they built it out to be a prison, which, I mean, really, it's a very similar kind of building or theme you could go with. So it was cool. This is one of the houses that I felt was the most crowded when I was going through it, and it was basically just like conga lining a bunch of people through, and this stupid kid behind me kept like stepping on my shoes as we were going through, so I didn't pay like half as much attention as I wanted to the actual haunted house, because stupid kid kept walking into the back of me every time anything mildly creepy happened. I just kind of wanted to punch him in the face after a while. I actually ended up yelling at him to watch where he was going because he was just pissing me off the whole time and I couldn't really enjoy what I was doing. So after that, back through the Voodoo Scare Zone and then into Darkwater Bayou. As I mentioned before, it's like you go into kind of a house. It's almost like a tourist trap kind of thing you'd see in like New Orleans or something, like a house that sells voodoo stuff like Reverend Zombies or Marie Laveau's or something like that. And then it brings you kind of out into the swamp, and then you're being attacked by the werewolves. And it was a very similar set to how it's been in previous years. You have like the forest stuff and cemeteries and different things like that. The only real difference is previously we kind of dump you out into like a Bourbon Street kind of thing at the end, or more of a, you know, New Orleans proper thing at the end. And this time I think it just had you go through the forest and then dumped you out into the rest of the park. This one, there was like nobody in line when I walked up. So I basically got straight into the house, and I don't remember if there were people near me at all in that one. So that was definitely a welcome reprieve after the previous house. So as I mentioned in my Phantasm video, this was a busy weekend for me, so I honestly didn't hang around too much longer after going through everything. I actually ran into a friend from like my robot combat stuff, so I hung out with him for a little bit. I went and did Witch of the Woods again because that was definitely my favorite out of all the houses, and I really wanted to experience it for a second time. Just as good the second time. And I think I went through Junkyard a second time as well, just because it was there. But beyond that, I figured it was a good time to call it a night. I did everything I needed to do, and it was as good a time as any to head out. So rating the house is a little difficult. I think The Forgotten's probably the bottom of the list for me. Just didn't really do much for me. Cell Block Zombies, just above that. I think I would have enjoyed that more if I wasn't as distracted as I was during that house, so I think that overall would have been more fun. Then The Residence, it was cool, but it wasn't like anything amazing. And Death Weather Bayou, and then Witch of the Woods. Witch of the Woods is like, if I was going to go back and only could do one house, I would do that one again, even though I've already done it twice, so that was definitely my favorite of the bunch. As far as the overall event itself, it was definitely cool. I don't have as high praises for it as I do of the Orlando event, but I don't feel as disappointed in it as I did with Halloween Horror Nights this year. So it definitely sits in between those two as far as my haunt experiences this year go. And it's funny because as I keep going through, like thinking about the Halloween Horror Nights thing, I don't even know if it's a fair comparison because Halloween Horror Nights had so much and it was hard to get through it all. And the Howl-O-Scream events had a lot less and I was able to get through it all. And I don't know if I'm judging them on that merit in a way where I was able to do more and have more freedom to do what I wanted because there was less stuff, and I'm just holding it against Halloween Horror Nights for giving me too much, I guess. I don't know. I really don't know if I'm judging it properly at this point, but so far that's where my rankings sit, and I think I might just get one or two more haunts in this season. Honestly, it may just be one more because I don't really have too much stuff planned right now. And I'm running out of time quickly, so we shall see. But yeah, it was a really fun time. I definitely look forward to going back again next year. Since I know they have a habit of keeping houses over, I really hope Witch of the Woods is one of the ones that stays over because I can't wait to do that again. That was just a lot of fun. But the whole thing was definitely a good time still. So that's it for this one. I will see you guys next time. Later.